Okay, so the fermentation is almost completed. I'm going to take the turbo cider from around the corner, which is in a fermentation bucket, and transfer it into a fermentation, well, it's a wine fermenter, so it's another bucket with a lid with an airlock. You can leave it in your bucket, provided you don't keep lifting your lids, and obviously make sure there's some gas release, so you can go and buy a grommet and place an airlock directly into the top of your bucket. You could probably drill a small hole and lay a flap of rubber over it, providing it was heavy enough, and if the pressure was enough it would lift it up. Nothing would get in there. If the lid's cracked on there, there's going to be a layer of carbon dioxide, so that should keep your beer from the oxygen. Once I've brought it in, I'm going to transfer it in via a siphon hose, making sure that I don't introduce any additional oxygen into it, so from the bottom of the bucket into the fermentation bin. And once I've done that, I'm going to pitch the 12 litres of apple juice directly on the top of that yeast cake which is left at the bottom. Because I've made yeast, it's still active, so there's a little bit of crud in amongst it, but that's fine. We'll put that down to add in a bit of extra flavour. I'm going to put 400 grams of sugar in amongst it because I want it to be slightly weaker. I don't want to increase any more or put any more stress on the yeast, because previously it was 1060. I didn't mention it was 1060, and I also forgot to tell you that the honey went in. The honey went in after I'd sort of finished the video. So yes, the 340 grams of runny honey went in as well. So that brought the specific gravity or starting gravity up to 1060, which, you know, that seems to be a good place to start. But this next brew is going to be slightly weaker, so I'm going to put sugar, I'm going to put apple juice, I'm going to put a bit of yeast nutrient in there. I'm not going to put the candy sugar, it's just going to be straight sugar. I say straight sugar, I think I have got a bag of my favourite, which is the natural unrefined. It's got a darker, well, it's not refined, it'll have a slight richness to it, a thick molasses, you know, it's not going to be heavy molasses at all, but it is slightly different and it brings a bit of colour to it. The yeast itself is going to have all the flavour. What else would I put in turbo cider? I can put some honey in there. If I've got some honey around, I'll do it. If I haven't, I won't. So that's for a video shortly, and I might show you what I'm doing with that in a minute. So see you soon. There you go. So not wishing to fear the foam. In amongst that there, I think you can probably see it sliding around, coating the edges. It's not great because it's just white, isn't it? But you can get an idea of it. So, nice few spins, making sure that, yeah, you can see it clinging into the sides there and slowly dripping down. That's all nice and clean, ready to go. So we'll put that on there. Another important piece of equipment we need is a racking cane. As you can see, a few drips of star sand still come out of that. I'll give it another blast in a second. But basically, it's your standard siphon tube on the end of, in this case, a stainless steel racking cane as an end on the base, so that it stops you pushing it into the sediment and it sucks in around. I do, when I use hops in my beers, if I can locate it, there you go, quickly show you. There's a piece of stainless steel mesh that I put over the end and I tie off with a rubber band, and then I can do my Terry Wogan thing. But no, that will stop any floating debris getting in. Debris! Which is hops, generally, when I'm making beer, dry hops. So, and that was, you've probably seen them in the cheap shops, pound shops. It's the strainer that goes in the base of your sink. They come in like 3 sizes for 99p. It's not super great stainless, but It's stainless because that's been wet a number of times and it hasn't rusted, so, and it acts as a very good shield. And if you don't have a bottom, well, everyone's got a bottom, most people got bottoms, baboons certainly have, you can put one of those over the bottom and make your own. Just a rubber band, make sure it's been cleaned. So, the floor's a little bit wet, so if I fall over, don't laugh. Now, another very, very important piece of equipment is a crate. Now, crates are very good for two things. Well, probably more than two things, but bottles. I use the bigger bottle, look at that, and they can stack. I think I've probably got about 8 of those, and they're probably only about £6 each. Yeah, you get the one where I got them from. They actually print your name on the side. I did it once, didn't want to do it again. Slightly pretentious, and my name's not David Bowie. Now, again, my CCTV system's going to shut down, so if you think there's an air raid, it's not. Crate, very handy. You can turn crates upside down, and you can place them on the floor. So you're going to use the siphon effect. You can then put your bin, which you can't see, and you can now, on top of that, and thus elevating. So, oh, another thing as well, this doesn't come with it, but these clips are quite handy because that will clip onto the side of your bucket, and you can then raise and lower as you decide. Personally, I like to move it down with the actual liquid, but generally when I'm bottling, and I'll do it straight from the fermenter. Some people, when they bottle, they put it into a bottling bucket, they add their sugar. I personally put sugar directly into the bottle and then siphon straight into it. But because when you're, I don't know why I'm tired, I must be ill. As the liquid goes down, I tend to move the siphon end with it, because you always find that it's clearer at the top than it is at the base. There you go. So, but that's another video. So, siphon, make sure it's clean. Your fermenter, obviously make sure that your airlock, mine's currently in soak at the moment. Make sure the airlock's being cleaned. Take the rubber out from your previous, don't just think, oh, it was alright last time. Take everything apart and give it clean. Now there's a rubber in the base of these, an O-ring. Make sure you clean and dry behind that, because you get some crud behind there and it stays wet, it's going to go mouldy at some point. So, and the idea of putting it in the fermenter here is that it's under airlock and you can forget about it. Yeah. So if you do sort of, once you put it in there, you pretty much saved it, apart from, you know, leaving it in a really hot area. You need to keep it still cool, depending on what your achievements or what your goals are at this point, because it could be that you'll put it in here to finish or have a secondary fermentation, or you're just fining it and making sure that everything drops out and then finally onto bottling. Or you may even be putting some oak into it, which I tend to do. Have I got any oak available at the moment? No, but I've got a number of jars with oak contained within, and if you decide, you could get yourself some very cheap brandies and put it within oak, and then the oak flavour will come out. But that's another video as well. So if you're going to put oak in there, you know, if it's plain or green oak as it were, or you're going to burn the oak and then put it in there, great. So that's that. I'll clean this lot up and I'll be back in a sec. So this is the wonderful cloudy mess that's in there at the moment. I haven't tasted it. I can smell it. I can tell you that the specific gravity is now at 1010, which effectively is a bottling. So it's almost fermented completely out, so it's going to be probably quite dry, and I'm about to let you know how that is. Smells a bit like hot dogs. Now, someone told me that if cider smells like hot dogs, it's normally good, and I agree. I don't know why hot dogs, but it does smell like hot dog sausages slightly. It's nice and tart. It's got a bit of sweetness left in it. It's a bit like, it's a bit orangey. It's nice, very nice. I've got John of Many Beers staying with me, so I will shortly, when he comes in from the garden, get him to try it and see what he thinks, and we'll be back. So he's just said it smells, well, tastes like orange juice, and yeah, he's got a smile on his face, so that's good. Another great tip as well, tea towels. I keep meaning to get myself a wedge so that I can lift up my buckets, because obviously at some point you need to tip it so you collect all of your juice. Don't worry about getting everything, because what you're taking out the bottom, putting it in there, you know, there's no benefit. But I tend to roll a tea towel in up and put that under the back. That gives me generally enough tilt. I don't do it until we get towards the end. The idea is you don't disturb the sediment, and there you go. Back in a minute. So I've siphoned the turbo into the fermenter, and what's remaining in the bucket is pretty much a little bit of slurry and yeast. What I will do is give it a spin and get some oxygen into that, because as we know, yeast likes oxygen. And then I'm going to put the rest of the apple juice in there. I've put the 400 grams of sugar in a saucepan with a small amount of apple juice to dissolve it. I don't want to get it boiling, because what I don't want to do is raise the temperature in here more than 30 degrees, otherwise I'm going to end up killing the yeast. So I'll put that in last so that the temperature is basically room temperature, and that will warm it very slightly and hopefully not kill too many of the yeasts. Stick the lid back on it and then stick it around the fermenter. So that's it. So in there we've got 12 litres of juice, we've got 400 sugar, we've got a teaspoon of yeast nutrient and the slurry from the previous brew, which is there. You can see the arm of John of Many Beers there if he was to lean forward. You can see him. But there he goes. One very important thing is I now have 2 of those. The reality is it's not, because I've got a lot more in the other room. But make sure that you label it. So a very simple package label is a very good idea. And then you can put your label on, say what it is, what date it is. Because if you get stock running, you will forget very, very soon what's in there. And having to test everything is a terrible thing to do. So label them so you know what they are. Incidentally, the specific gravity of this is 1052, so 1052. Quite sure what that will come out as alcohol. I'm sure someone will mention it to me, but I know it's in the area that I like, so that's the reason why I put 400 in there and not 600 this time. This will probably be a bit stronger, but I'm likely to keep this a little bit longer. The other thing is there's going to be a little bit more yeast in here. This will get going quicker. This took about a day and a half to get going. I was a little bit concerned that it wasn't going to start, so get me on it. Not a lot I can do about it, but I could see there was activity, so I just left it alone, and I think by day 3 it was frothing, so very good. That's pretty much it. So I've just made another turbo cider on the slurry of this turbo cider in what, 20 minutes, if that, and making this one took about a week because I was going to film it. So that's how simple it is. Make a 4 litre batch if you decide. Make a 12. Personally, I would make a 20. That's 20 there. Make a 20. Yeah. But make sure that you've got something to put it in. So start planning for bottles. So bottles or kegs. I could show you kegs. I will actually, bear with me a second. Kegs, so these are my Thunderbirds. Two different kegs, both stainless steel. As you can see, one's taller than the other. They actually hold, I think they're the same. I think they work out about 18, 19 litres. So, which is very good. If you're making a brew, everything will go in there. They've got posts for your gas in and your gas out. Obviously, if you move up to these, you'll need a gas system and a delivery system, so pumps, etc. But just to show you, this is what they call a Cornelius keg, and this is what they call a jolly keg. So the jolly keg is slightly wider and squat, and obviously this one's not in there at all. They pretty much have the same tops on them. Let's try to show you this one, because basically snap release, O-ring, it gets pressurised and the pressure goes up, forcing this to seal. Sometimes you have to give them a bit of a wiggle. I must say, the jolly kegs weren't my first choice, but having owned a, well, I'm trying to think how many I've got of this. I've got, well, if that's number 4, I've got at least 4, but I think it's 8. But the Cornelius kegs tend to require to be pressurised to seal them, whereas these seem to be just naturally fitting. They will fit just by you snapping it down, and that's enough to fit. I don't know if it's just better quality. That said, I'm pretty sure they're both made by the same people. This is made by Firestone. No, this is an Italian version, so not exactly the same, but at the end of the day, these posts are interchangeable, so you don't have to buy a couple of different gas systems. As I say, that's another video. Very quick look at the top, if you want to look at the top. Quite funny really, I once was doing a few swaps with a fellow brewer who lives local. We both got the same system, so we decided to make a beer for each other. We went to a car park in Basildon. I'm sitting there with a couple of these by my feet. People are thinking, what's that? Because it does, you must admit, it does look a bit strange. And he then turns up. We hadn't met each other other than on the forum. We sort of shook hands, swapped kegs over, and there was lots of people almost staring, watching what the hell are they doing. So yeah, interesting. Also, if you're bringing gas bottles home, you get stopped. People might think, what are you up to? So that's kegs. So that can go straight into there, pressurise it with some CO2. That will sit in there for as long as you decide, and then you can pull it out your pump dispenser, kegerator. Might even show you what a kegerator build is one day, but pretty much it's a fridge. Now, that's the reason why I went for these. You can get 2 of those in a fridge standing side by side, and you can get 2 of those standing in a fridge side by side. These are obviously slightly better because you've probably got more headroom. These just fit in the fridge I've got. I think it's an ice diamond, which I made a kegerator from, and these have got loads of headroom. Best thing about these, when I put these in my incubator, I can actually get 4 of these, whereas I can only get 2 of these, or I can get 2 of these and I can have a bucket in there as well, because you can use the valve on the top of these as an airlock if you create an airlock, and you can use these to ferment in. So if you don't want to ferment in plastic, you can ferment in here. So that's kegs for you, but that's another day. Personally, bottles are good, readily available. Make sure that they're nice and strong. Again, it's got a punt in the bottom, makes it a little bit stronger. The other thing is, these particular bottles, because they're 750s and they're the champagne size, your standard crown cap mechanism, the pull down one that you do by hand, isn't going to work for one reason. And that reason is the size of the crown caps. The crown caps are, I believe they're 22 mils, whereas the normal bottle tops are a 19 mil. You're going to have to buy a bench capper. that said, I never owned a bench capper until I started putting them in the bigger bottles, but it's probably the best thing I ever bought as far as brew day is concerned. Very easy, it's got a stand, pull it down and it connects. Little tip, if you do get one, get yourself, this plastic bit comes off, put a little screw on it, because this is the smaller cap and that is the larger cap. You unscrew them, they're interchangeable. You will lose them, so by putting a little butterfly end on the top of that, I know where it is all the time. So, and another thing is that you mark your bottle. So if you're dealing with a particular type of bottle, if I'm using 750s, I use the left bottles. If I'm using 500s, I use Timmy Taylor bottles. Timothy Taylor bottles are quite strong, and it's not a bad beer. So if you've got to drink something to get your bottles, drink something you like. So do a little bit of research on that as well. Also, go off and use your pet bottles if you're just starting out. You want to see how it goes. So, laters.